I have actually known two of the Word Girls for more than 20 years. I met Erin Murphy at the University of Tulsa back in 2003, where we were both attending um, a gathering for the winners and finalists of the Pablo Neruda Prize in Poetry. And 2 years later, in 2005, she invited me down from Connecticut, where I was living at the time, to read at Washington College, where she was teaching. Okay, is that better? Okay. And at dinner that night, I met another Chestertown poet, Meredith Hadaway, who was just about to publish her first book. And I had no idea that 1 year later, I would be moving to the Eastern Shore myself. So, not long after I got here, I was invited. I was invited to participate at the Gunston School's In Celebration of Books event. And a young English teacher named Amanda Newell came up to me at lunch that day and shyly admitted, I write poetry too. Right? And over the next several years, I watched her talent blossom. So these three women really represent my roots in the poetry world down here, such as it is. And look how far they have all come. Meredith Hadaway is now the author of 4 books of poetry, most recently Small Craft Warning, a collaboration with the visual artist Marcy Dunn Ramsey. She has received fellowships from the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, as well as an individual artist award from the Maryland Arts Council. She has an MFA in poetry from Vermont College of Fine Arts and is currently the Sophie Kerr Poet in Residence at Washington College. Erin Murphy, a Washington College alum, and as I said, a former professor there, has written or edited more than a dozen books and has 2 books of poetry and an anthology coming out soon. Professor of English at Penn State Altoona College. She is also Blair County, Pennsylvania's first poet laureate, and she has been inducted into their Arts Hall of Fame. She's won many awards, including the $5,000 Reader's Choice Award from Rattle Magazine. Amanda Newell, amazingly, has also won a $5,000 prize from Rattle. I mean, that's more than most poets make in their entire careers, right there. It's true. It's true. She won it for her second poetry chapbook, I Will Pass Even to Acheron, from which she'll be reading tonight. A graduate of the Warren Wilson MFA program for writers, she has received scholarships from the Breadloaf Writers Conference in Vermont and the Frost Place in New Hampshire, as well as a fellowship from the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Her first full-length book, Postmortem Say, is due out any day now. So, with their deep connections to the Eastern Shore, the Word Girls have brought poetry to diverse audiences while addressing environmental and social issues with sensitivity, poignancy, and often humor. Please join me in welcoming the Word Girls.
Good evening. It's really, really great to be in this beautiful space. I was last here to hear Sue Ellen read at the beginning of this series, which was a great night. And so I'm honored to be invited to come and take the same stage. So without further ado, let's start. When dreams go walking, they wear no clothes in public spaces, fall from heights and lose their teeth. Dreams call for help into mute telephones, sit down to take exams in classes they forgot they had signed up for. They find back stairs, secret rooms, and hidden gardens in a house they used to live in. They go dancing, they go dancing with ex-boyfriends. Recall it all, forgive everything, and let them go. They can fly. They can fly. And then they come across your parents, young and talking once again. They're leaning toward each other, head to head, in a network of nerve and synapse, as alive as ever, as real as anything in love. This next poem goes over like a lead balloon with my students at Washington College. It requires you to be of a certain age. So those of you who don't get the references in this poem are free to check your text messages. It's called Old Days. In the old days, we stuck candles in wine bottles, Mateus or Chianti, and let the wax drip down the neck and sides while we lingered over meals of noodle casseroles made with cream of mushroom soup. We smoked cigarettes in the old days, sometimes menthols, Cools, or Salems, inhaling the tiny chill like a premonition. In the old days, we drank instant coffee, laced with chemicals to make it instantly, so we could linger even longer and smoke more menthol cigarettes. Nights were long in the old days. We drank more coffee, opened another bottle of Chianti, watched more wax join the blob that clung around the base of the candle, which we poked with blackened match heads from a Pep Boys matchbook. We performed tricks in the old days, lighting matches without removing them from the book, solving riddles about snow shovels in only 2 moves. Or sometimes we just lit matches, one by one, to watch them flare before we dropped them on our empty plates. In the old days, we would talk. There was always so much to say in the haze of candle wax and sulfur, sipping Nescafe. Every word, still in its wrapper of possibility, held so much time, and often we gave our sentences extra syllables to stretch them further, strings of uhs, you knows, and likes. And this did not annoy us in the old days, because we still had hours and hours before we'd hear the clink and rattle of the milkman, and in a final puff of menthol, we would blow the candle out. Thank you. I'm teaching eco-poetry at Washington College, and one of the great characteristics is this highlighting the sense of connection between all things on our planet and our universe, for that matter. But even so, this sign struck me as unusual, which I saw at the Origins of Man exhibit at the Museum of Natural History. So this is the title of the poem. We share 60% of our DNA with a banana. This explains so much. Why King Kong fell for blonde Fay Ray. Why everything has strings attached. Why we're drawn to rum but cringe at the sound of blenders. Why we say someone untested is still green. Why we feel safer in a bunch. Why we think banana peels are funny. Why Basho chose to name himself Banana for the kindred plant that grew beside his hut. And when we lose control, we go bananas. My friend tells me bananas saved her life. A child illness back in Africa, a tortured stomach and wailing mouth that nothing could put right until, oh brave banana brother, unlike your fallen apple cousin, you do not tempt but sacrifice. No wonder banana clusters spring from hearts and grow in tears called hands. Like you, our skins are tough, our souls are tender, and yes, like you, we bruise so easily. Thank you. During the COVID lockdown, I found that I could not really write a whole poem. I just felt a little speechless. So I started writing a snippet every day. And then, lo and behold, after many snippets went by, I realized that they were all in conversation with each other and that they were sort of little seeds that started to take root. And I wound up sort of assembling them into sequences. So here's one of those sequences. It's called Bloom. 1. Rainwater, hose water. The same source, but only one brings news from thunderous skies. 2. Flowers need rain as we need flowers. They teach us to bloom. 3. My hydrangeas refuse to be blue, as my friend's hair is now allowed to be white. 4. All I hear from the silent roof, no rain, no rain, no rain. 5. The sun burns brighter, but the moon grows dim as we open into sky. 6. Rose, a messenger, lovely name, past tense of rise, presently a scent. 7. White irises have raised their heads in a garden I did not plant. They just appeared, small ruffled gods. 8. Returned like a cat, agile and sweet, rain swivels at last down the window pane. 9. Fragrant, even in the dark, my roses always end with weeping. This is another poem from my teaching at Washington College. I took students out on a wooden skiff that the Echo Hill Outdoor School has a number of historic wooden boats. This was a few years back. And Captain Andy was, telling us all about crabbing and showing us the parts of the boat. And I said to him, when I first moved here, there were so many wooden boats working the Chester River, and I don't see them anymore. What's happened? And he said, well, there's only one place left where you'll still see the wooden boats go out, and that's at the Narrows, which seemed like such a perfect metaphor for a way of life that was dwindling. And that's the title poem from my second book. So this is At the Narrows. Now, when even midday sun holds shadows, and only the wooden boats are left, bless scarred hulls and splintered pilings. Bless the hands that still twist eel into lines of hard commerce. Bless the motor's stutter, declaring, yes, we will go out. Bless the foul mud that peppers the gunnel, the ascent of the bait, its twitch as it goes over the roller. Bless the slow crab, too greedy for stink to see the net coming. And the basket, slats leaking a scrabble of claws, Wanda J., Alice Rose, Edna, grubby river angels, decks swollen with rain, smelling of brine and rot, all divot and slop. Bless your dead rise, your hard chine, your rudder. In the morning, all will blur into mist. Crabs will begin their exodus to deeper waters. We tell ourselves they will be back. May this, too, be true. Thank you. I spend a lot of time engaged in bird drama. It's hard to avoid if you pay attention to the birds outside your window. I live right on the river, so, it's just amazing parade and characters, and you start to fall in love with them. So I want to dedicate this poem to Flacco, the Eurasian eagle owl who escaped from Central Park Zoo and survived for a whole year in Manhattan, which is more than a lot of people can say. It's called Synonyms for Faith. All day, a lone goose stands on the floating dock. He nibbles at the water, stretches, preens, but does not fly. No sign of the flock that was there the day before. I worry he's injured or maybe lost his mate. The tide comes in, raising the wooden slats that hold him, then retreats. Ducks crowd by and leave again. The sun moves down the river, tossing amber light across the lower layer of clouds. Still there, now a silhouette against the glowing night sky. There is no lonelier sound than the cry of just one goose. Unless you hear another from further down the river, I can't be sure. I only know the goose is gone now, that when I look again, I see a pair of shadows wing their way along the river's silver surface. My most recent project is a little book called Small Craft Warning, because it's full of miniature poems and miniature paintings by Marcy Dunn Ramsey. And again, we found ourselves in a conversation. We both live on the Chester. And so we put together a little collection. Sorry that you can't see the paintings, because the biggest ones are like 3.5 inches. I mean, they're very small. And so I coupled them up with, little poems that they seem to be in conversation with. And I'm just going to read a few of those. They don't have titles because we didn't want to steer the reader in any particular direction. We want you to think about, the paintings and the title and the poems both have their titles in the back, but not on the same page. So they're just numbered. 1. In the wake of a storm, eerily warm through a thick embrace of fog, snow geese trail across what had been ice in single file, pale shadows of a former year. Anything can happen. This is 5. Like a small creek, I swirl through the smooth rocks of ordinary days, knowing there are boulders ahead. 6. I no longer worry what I should have done. Going forward, I only worry about going forward. 9. My mind wandering creek and cove like a small boat searching for a dock. 14. We no longer see many stars. What other fires have we extinguished? 16. Between the light beyond us and the gray we face, bright edges of tenderness. 17. Sun and shadow on my sloping roof are all I need to know of time, declining but warm. 18. Blue to gold, then silver. The waning light changes all the colors. Surely, too, all hearts. Thank you. So I'd like to close with this poem that sort of has become a benediction for me of my beloved Chester River, but it's honor of all the rivers on the Eastern Shore. We're so lucky to have so many. And they inspire us and bring us peace. Why the river? Because it is a body. Because it rises in our sweat, marries our breath to the cold. Because it spills light back to us and hoards our shadows. Because it leaves when gravity insists, but always comes back. Because it traps the clouds so we can sail across both heaven and earth. Because it carries our tears, swells with our salt. Because it is a body. Because it bears our weight. Thank you. Up next, the amazing Erin Murphy.
Thank you all for coming tonight. It is such a treat to see so many people here who didn't give birth to us. Because usually it's only your mom. who shows up at your poetry reading. It's funny, even people who love you will find like great excuses for not attending your poetry reading. You know, I have to wash my hair. It's raining out. You have to water my cactus. For tonight, a woman tells me, "Oh, Wednesday? No, that's when I trim my guinea pig's toenails." I was like, "You don't even have a guinea pig, Mom." I'm going to start by reading a poem. Some of you may remember the tanker crash that happened on I-95 outside Philadelphia this past summer. And when that happened, it made me think about how many formative experiences I had over the years that involved I-95. I have friends who live near the Mississippi River and, you know, their lives are tied to that. And I started realizing, you know, 95 is kind of like that for me. Yeah, so I put this poem together. What was so interesting was when it was published in Rattle, I ended up getting messages from people from all over the world who had at some point or another lived near I-95. And people just had these like connections. It's just funny that it took so long for me to like realize there were so many experiences tied to that. So this is actually forthcoming in my new book that'll be out in April called Fluent in Blue. So this is I-95 Corridor. This is where I was cited for reckless driving, and my uncle quipped, 95 is the route number, not the speed limit. 2. This is where I stopped with an ex-boyfriend on the last stretch from Miami, and a motel clerk asked if we wanted the all-night or the hourly rate. 3. This is where my grad school U-Haul broke down, and I waited for the wrecker with a Swiss Army knife flexed against my bare thigh. 4. This is where I learned all the lyrics to Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues, rewinding the cassette till it snapped in the deck. 5. This is where I interviewed for an adjunct teaching gig that would cost me more in tolls and gas than I'd earn. 6. This is where thieves took my Plymouth Breeze on a joyride, then dumped it on the shoulder, my just cashed paycheck still in the console. 7. This is where my husband missed an exit for the symphony and grazed a concrete pillar beneath an underpass. 8. This is where I ordered my daughter vanilla ice cream with extra maraschino cherries after she lay corpse still for her first echocardiogram. 9. This is where a tanker truck caught fire, melting the highway's steel beams until an entire span collapsed like a ruptured aorta. 10. Corridor. A long, narrow passage between rooms or land or time. 11. They're still sifting through the truck driver's remains. 12. I can never remember if it's steel, EE, oneself, or steel, EA, oneself. Am I supposed to harden my feelings or shove them under my shirt like a shoplifter? 13. In the show I'm watching, one corridor leads to another, rough cut after rough cut of white walls in a workplace maze. 14. The day of the symphony, we abandoned our SUV on the off-ramp and ran 4 blocks to the concert hall, plunking into plush seats just in time for da-da-da-dum. 15. Commute, hospital, concert, wedding, commute, bar mitzvah, commute, funeral, commute. 16. Lately, I need to sit closer to the throat of a bass trombone or purring cat to feel a stirring in my pulse. 17. My uncle is gone now, a stroke, 2 days before Christmas. 18. For years, I replayed that last conversation in my ex's red Jetta, his hands trying to bend the steering wheel, his eyes swollen. 19. What's the difference between carefree and careless? 20. I'm not sure. I want to know. 21. So many bodies and bodies in motion. 22. I can't steal myself. I'm already stolen. So as of next week, my husband and I will have been together 34 years. And in all of that time, I've only written him one love poem, and it mentions colonoscopies. I'm just romantic that way. But I finally wrote him a true love poem. So I'm going to read that to you, not the colonoscopy poem. I'm going to read you the real love poem. It's called That First Summer. Most weekends, we packed our blue canoe with a tent, sleeping bags, books, a cooler, and enough food and wine for the weekend, then paddled out to a sandbar in the middle of the river. For 2 days, we swam and read and drank and fucked, stretching out in the sun, lean and dark. Later, we learned that some nights, engineers release waters from the dam upstream to control the floodplain. Experienced boaters knew to check the schedule. What did we know? Nothing about harnessing nature. Everything about being swept away. And I'll have you know, my husband is perfectly fine with not having any poems written about him. So please don't. But you know, having one love poem, and your only one love poem, and it mentions colonoscopies, gets you out of a lot of writing assignments. So if you have a friend who says, can you write a poem for my wedding? Can you write a poem for me to give my girlfriend for Valentine's Day? You can say, I can. I've written one love poem. It mentions colonoscopies. And they're like, I'm going to go with Hallmark. I'm good. So my most recent book is called Taxonomies, and these are demi-sonnets, which is a form that I invented. They're 7-line poems, so half of a sonnet. Sonnet's 14 lines. And normally when we think about taxonomies, we think of scientific classification. These poems classify things that we don't normally classify. So this one is called Taxonomy of Cell Phones. In 1990 BC, before cells, I chatted with a stranger in a laundromat. We've been friends ever since. Now a communication device keeps people from talking to each other. Our faces half aglow in a screen eclipse. We cradle phones like baby birds who've slipped from the nest. Feed them from our fingertips. So Meredith read some poems about rivers. I used to live in Chesapeake City, so on the C&D Canal. So this is called Taxonomy of Canals. Panama, Amsterdam, Venice. Root canals, birth canals. The C&D Canal where I biked with my son tucked into a toddler seat as ocean-going ships from Russia and China slid by. Such a brief passage. My son waved to the men on deck. The men waved back. They were just passing through. We were, too. Several of the poems in taxonomies are based on Google autocomplete. Do you know what that is? Like you go to type in a question in Google and then it'll autocomplete what the most commonly asked questions are based on that phrase. So, I teach at Penn State. So if I were Googling, it would be like, what time is, and the first thing that would come up, what time is the Penn State game, So I got interested in this idea, and so I would type in these phrases, and I would see what the most popular questions were that were being asked, and I created a bunch of these demi-sonnets based on that. So I'm going to share one of them with you. It's a Taxonomy of Google Autocomplete. What's the difference? What's the difference between jelly and jam? Between club soda and seltzer? Between a modem and a router? What's the difference between llamas and alpacas, mildew and mold, salamanders and newts? What's the difference between a passport and a visa, brown eggs and white, stars and planets, me and you? So another book of demi-sonnets that I have is called Assisted Living. And these poems are about the whole life cycle, and a whole section of the book is about my late mother-in-law, Anne Palmer de Prospo. She lived to be 99 years old and had just an extraordinary life. She lived independently right up until she died. She played Chopin for me on her baby grand Steinway 5 days before she died. We now have her Steinway. So she was a concert pianist, and when she was in her late teens, she was the leader of the Major Bowes all-girl band, if you guys are familiar with Major Bowes, any of you. And so I wanted to capture her life, but also my husband is an only child, and so even though she was living independently, much of the reason she was able to do that was because of the caregiving we were able to provide. So the book focuses on caregiving and caregivers, because my feeling is that caregivers are unsung heroes. So much of that labor gets unrecognized. So I have a few of those that I want to share with you. This one is called At 16. She ran off to join Major Bowes' all-girl band. First stop, Chicago, where she dropped her father's Italian name, adopting the Palmer from the Hilton downtown. She headlined with Sinatra and Pat Boone. And now she shuffles across the room, naked under a hospital gown. Waiting. The woman who chopped her hands like cymbals now finds herself waiting for everything. A sponge bath, a chirpy nurse to wipe her bum, a sun to blow in like weather. Tick, tick till lunch, though she can't stand the food. Tick, tick, tick till dinner. Tick, tick, tick. Here, even the sweet potatoes are bitter. Tasks for the living. You attach the walker basket with the built-in cup holder, the one that lets her carry a glass of water to her favorite seat. Before you leave, you test the battery in her hearing aid, coax a curl with your finger dabbed in spit, and kiss her papery cheek. Lean-to. After a morning spent bathing, buttoning, and hoisting your mother like an overgrown infant, we find the one sunlit table in an otherwise dark sushi place, and without speaking, touch each of our fingertips together. Lean-to, temple, shelter. Let it be known. That lake in New Hampshire, its surface shimmering like sequins on the gold dress she wore on tour in 1934, her body bobbing in pockets of spring-fed cold. This is how she wants to go. And as I mentioned, she lived to be 99 years old, and just extraordinary. I learned so much from her, and we still miss her all the time. I'm going to end with a poem that's in 7 different parts. I'll tell you a couple things about it. One is that it is probably the most meaningful experience I've ever had as a college professor with one of my students. The second thing I want you to know is that there are some terms in the poem, and they're actual terms, and these are the actual definitions. So I didn't make up these definitions. This is called Debriefing, a poem in parts. 1. My left leg. My left leg struts up the street in search of a full-bodied cup of cardamom coffee in a cafe where men in snug trousers talk with their eyebrows. My left leg lingers by grilled kebabs and blood-red pomegranate juice, by vendors unscrolling grates for late-night shoppers. On a candlelit veranda overlooking the Tigris, you'll find my leg engaged in a cutthroat game of backgammon or caught up in the rapid-fire ticks of domino tiles. My left leg sits in Haraya Square with lovers who lick each other's ice cream cones as if they're kissing. My left leg has no idea what it's missing. 2. Language redeployment, beach party, noun. A task organization charged with facilitating the landing and movement off the beaches of troops, equipment, and supplies. 3. 6 alternative uses for tampons. Squeegees for dusty night vision goggles. Nerf darts for slow days on rooftop patrol. Ornaments for Christmas cacti. Toys for flea-bitten alley cats. Makeshift spoons for MREs. Plugs for bullet wounds. 4. Language redeployment, early spring, noun, an anti-reconnaissance satellite weapon system. 5. At the reading. I am sitting. I am sitting at a poetry reading. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student, an Iraq War veteran. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student, an Iraq War veteran who lost his leg. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student, an Iraq War veteran who lost his leg, and we are listening to another veteran read his poems about the war. My student is turning pages in his book, following along with each poem. My student is turning pages in his book, following along. My student is turning pages in his book. My student is turning pages. My student is turning. My student is turning. Mortar, the poet says. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of my student. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of my student, thinking of his father. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of my student, thinking of his father smashing his fist on the kitchen table at 2 a.m. I think of my student. I think of my. I think of what I think is mine, of what is his. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of how close it is to mortal. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of how close it is. 6. Language redeployment, free play, noun, an exercise to test the capabilities of forces under wartime conditions. 7. If you are reading this. If you are reading this, I wish I could hit rewind. If you are reading this, I guess it was a one-way trip. If you are reading this, Mom, don't be sad. If you're reading this, Dad, take care of Mom. If you're reading this, I have one request, bagpipes and Amazing Grace. Okay, that's 2. If you are reading this, Jake, you can have my truck, but don't ride the clutch, because I'm watching you. If you are reading this, it was my time to go. If you are reading this, you already know. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. And next up, we have Amanda Newell. Come on up, Amanda.
That's really bright. Aaron's husband was my thesis advisor at Washington College too, so rich to prosper. It's a delight to be here and to read with Aaron and Meredith, who have really who are great friends of mine and who I've known for such a long time. And when I was teaching at the Gunston School, they of course did participate, as Sue Ellen Thompson did in the In Celebration of Books program. So it's just anytime that I can get together with the Word Girls, and it's a delight. So thank you. I'm going to be reading from my forthcoming manuscript. It's called Postmortem Say, and it's actually going to press this weekend. So finally, I'm really excited about that. And in the process of editing this manuscript, everything in the book, I should say, was written before the death of my ex-husband and before the death of a beloved. And so it really, even though it's called Postmortem Say, it was written before that. And it really does chronicle the end of a marriage and an affair. And as many of you in this room know, my ex-husband was Judge Jonathan Newell, who was the circuit court judge in Caroline County, who committed suicide in the wake of an FBI investigation. So going back and reading through a lot of these poems, it was an interesting experience for me in the wake of all that, because I realized that there was so much. Not only we both had sort of our own secrets. I had that neither of us knew about, but there was so much in this manuscript that was already embodied in, and it was so prescient, and it was very difficult to kind of go through. So this is actually the first time, like, being back here in Easton, so close to home, or what was home, is not really easy for me, but I'm delighted to be here in all of your company and to see so many of my family and friends from all different walks of life, colleagues and former students from the Gunston School, my former neighbors, my poet friends, my colleagues, a colleague from work now. So that just, and family friends. And so I just want to say that, thank you. And it means more than you know. Thank you. So just, I'm going to read mostly narrative poems, but I'll start with the title poem, which kind of, I think, sets the tone, and it's more of a little lyric, and it's Postmortem Say. Could say crimson limbs and blood moon glass shatter. Say he was chrome smoke, the night diamond flecked. Say the cause was exsanguination due to blunt force trauma from a wreck. Say too many contributing factors to list. Or say the truth, which is to say, it was dark. We never saw each other. Say by the time we did, it was already too late. The loss total. Sadly, none of my poems this evening are funny. I'm sorry about that. I'm actually I have a pretty good sense of humor in real life, as I think my friends can attest. But these are, sorry, it's a downer. It's a downer. Butchering the Sika deer. Oh, by the way, and I did put these together with, sorry. There's like way too many deer in this manuscript, and so I figured I would actually lean into that tonight, and so every poem that I read will have a deer in it or reference camo in some way, so I'm sure you all understand that. Butchering the Sika deer. Bound by her hind legs, she dangles from the maple. So small she twirls a little in the breeze. I watch my son as he works the knife slowly along the split seam of the cow's belly, peeling away the cotton flaps of her hide like a sock until nothing is left but flesh wrapped in white swirls of gauzy tissue. I did not teach him how to call for his prey on the marsh, how to shoot a living thing, how to butcher it. That was his father. Like his father, he does not mind the blood. He'll take what he needs, nothing more. When he's done, he'll drag what's left of her into the woods. portent. He'd gone again, dressed in camo and a bulletproof vest, cig at his hip. Gone despite her constant nagging, the why go if you don't have to, and what if something happens, please? But where else the exhilaration? With their sickly boys, 3 and 1, who never slept? With his depressed, distant wife, who left piles of laundry, never cooked, cleaned, gardened? Who cut her eyes at him? Yes, he'd seen her. His heavy foot, the shaking floor. Still, he always came home, no different tonight, but for the quickly conjured summer storm. His pickup struck by lightning as he pulled into the drive, and he nearly burned alive while she'd been where? Safe inside. And later swore she hadn't heard him. Unlock it, damn it! His fists on the door. How to track a body. What can I say? You can track a body by the blood it leaves. You will need patience. You may need to get on your hands and knees and crawl through brown stalk and winter thicket. You may find yourself walking in circles for hours when the trail goes cold. You may never find it. You may need to come back the next day and look again in the light. You will need a good eye to see threads of white snagging briars, to tell one kind of blood from another, gut from liver, lung from heart. A lung shot, for instance, foams pink, but a heart shot is darker. It spills all at once. I'm going to end with a longer poem that's actually not in this manuscript, and it's actually probably more of a true postmortem, than the book itself, weirdly. But okay. After the buck left, I'm sorry, it's just kind of funny. After the buck landed on the hood of the oncoming car, he dragged himself, haunches collapsed over snapped back legs, across the road and graveled shoulder, then into the grass through the thin stand of trees at the edge of the field, where, finally, he stopped, unable to crawl to wherever it was his body still wanted to go and was trying to go, but could go no longer. A 6-pointer. Or 3, depending how you count, which depends where you live. Here in the East, you count every point. That's what my ex says. He's a hunter, my ex. I can say it now. Divorce. The thing I said I wanted because I loved another man who was dying. If not now, then when, is what I said. But then, when I had to go back at the beginning of the pandemic to the house that had once been my home, I was banished to the game room in the garage, where I slept beneath the severed heads of Whitetail and Sika, my ex's trophy dead. Penance, I thought, for all I had done or not done well enough. But there was steadiness in their glass eyes, the kind of steadiness you need to love a thing. Or to take aim. I remember once steadying my cell phone's slivered light over a dead doe as our son sliced her belly. He, who had been sliced from mine, peeled her insides like fruit from the rind. It was beautiful and necessary and awful. I never told him how much it hurt to watch. They're a nuisance, I know, the deer. And so they die and die. Like that buck. Not even the rut, but he'd been after a doe. His suffering was, there's no other way to say it, exquisite. Did I say I wanted this to be my first post-divorce love poem? This is where you enter. You and I were together when it happened. I told myself it was not our wreck, that this sort of thing happens all the time. Not everything has to mean something. God, I fall in love so easily. I tried to warn you. But you wanted to see where we might go until you didn't. I wanted more from you. I wanted another, as if we could fuck him back into the world and undo all of it, what we both lost. But what's gone is gone. I see that now. Sometimes there is no saving a thing, which is the worst kind of grief, a helpless, empty-handed one, the kind that beggars you. So there I was, in the middle of the road on a mountain in Virginia, begging for someone, anyone, to please pull over. Please, do you have a gun? There's a deer. In the end, it took 4 shots, 2 in the heart and 2 in the head, because a handgun is meant for human kill. Love. I tried to write a different story for us, one we could both live with, a happier one, a 5-minute earlier one. But mercy, I could make nothing of it. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming tonight. A special shout out to our dear friends, the Avalon Foundation, for being a host for this wonderful occasion. And we will be coming back on April 24th with Laura Oliver, our wonderful and gifted spy columnist. And thank you again. This all goes to support the arts in Talbot County, and we're so grateful. Thank you.